Spotify has begun removing Neil Young's music from the streaming platform following a public letter from the musician that called on the company to choose between him and Joe Rogan. Young made the ultimatum and accused Spotify of spreading vaccine misinformation by allowing Rogan to continue posting on the platform. Following the news, a Spotify spokesperson told The Hollywood Reporter, quote, "We want all the world's music and audio content to be available to Spotify users. We regret Neil's decision to remove his music from Spotify, but hope to welcome him back soon."
The Surgeon General weighed in on Rogan's status on MSNBC and said that in order to get through the pandemic, companies need to do more to stop, quote, misinformation on their platforms. Let's watch.
Now, when it comes to how we root out the misinformation in society right now, and give people access to actual accurate information, we've got to do several things. Number one, we've got to recognize that our technology platforms, whether particularly social media, these have an important role to play. These are the predominant places where we're seeing misinformation spread. These platforms have still not stepped up to do the right thing and do enough, I should say, to reduce the spread of misinformation. But each of us also has a role to play here because we all have platforms. And particularly if you're somebody who has a large following, whether you're an entertainer, a politician, in the media, it's your responsibility, all of our responsibilities, to make sure that we are thoughtful in what we are sharing. This is not just about entertainment. It's not just about garnering clicks. This is about people's lives. And we have seen time and time again that misinformation costs people their lives. We all have this is not just about what government can do. This is about companies and individuals recognizing that the only way we get past misinformation is if we are careful about what we say and we use the power that we have to limit the spread of that misinformation. That's going to be a critical part of how we get through this pandemic.
Democratic strategist Andrew Feldman and Senior Director of Policy at the Conservative Partnership Institute, Rachel Bovard, are here to discuss. So let's start with you, Andrew. Tell us where you fall on the Rogan, Neil Young gate, and what you think about policing people like Joe Rogan.
Look, I'm not sure this is going to make many of your viewers happy this morning, but good for Neil Young. Neil Young has been standing up for what's right since the beginning of his career. You go back, and many of you may remember that song, Sweet Home Alabama, where, folks, the writers of that song attacked Neil Young for his support standing up for civil rights. And Neil Young is absolutely right here today and yesterday and every day forward on his fight here against misinformation and disinformation around the vaccine. Because let me tell you, misinformation and disinformation is one of the most dangerous threats to our society today, and it's killing people.
Rachel, is misinformation killing people? Is this the dangerous threat to our society? I think we probably agree on this. I don't think that we're one takedown of a bad Facebook post away from convincing a couple more million people to get vaccinated. What do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree, and I'm more concerned about the misinformation coming from the federal government over the course of this pandemic. As we've seen information constantly change. Don't forget, the World Health Organization, which is the metric for a lot of these platforms to take down information that disagrees with the World Health Organization, said in the beginning of this pandemic, oh, don't worry, guys, COVID's not contagious between humans, no big deal. So look, we learned a lot over this pandemic, but I think the biggest thing we've learned is that nobody has a monopoly on information. And I think the reason that Joe Rogan is so popular is because he doesn't cram it down anyone's throats. He lets people come on his show, talk about their views, he pushes back, he fact checks some of them, and where he feels it's appropriate. And that's, kind of, I think, how it should be done. It's interesting you played that clip of the Surgeon General. The Surgeon General's office has been so aggressive with social media platforms, with podcasters to take down their content, was last summer where he stood at the White House podium and said, I've created a list for Facebook of people they should remove. I'm sorry, that's just a ridiculous notion that the White House and the federal government should be policing information, that we're allowed to talk about, that we're allowed to consume.
Yeah, Andrew, do you have any concern or qualms about, a government figure sort of heavy-handedly dictating to a private company's platform what content they should be hosting? Doesn't that run afoul of First Amendment concerns?
Let me remind you, Robbie, what we saw last weekend, because I think you need a reminder. We saw last weekend in Washington, D.C., protests against vaccine mandates, speakers comparing vaccine mandates to the Holocaust. Let me tell you something, Robbie. My grandparents both survived the Holocaust. My grandfather lost 8 brothers and sisters and his parents. My grandmother was in Auschwitz for 6 months. The fact that we are comparing vaccine mandates to the Holocaust, and the fact that we are seeing in our streets today people holding up yellow stars of David, is because of misinformation in this country, because of disinformation. And we need to do everything possible to root it out, because I swear to God, it is killing people. And I work with doctors every single day who are seeing that in the ER.
Well, I don't think, obviously, comparisons to Nazism are always extreme and hyperbolic, no matter who's making them. I mean, Democrats make them too, right, about Trump world. So I agree with you on that, but I don't agree. I think the vaccine, I am against the vaccine mandates. I worry to the degree to which we're stigmatizing and not allowing people to.
Robbie, vaccine mandates have proven to work. You look at all the people who have instituted vaccine mandates, United Airlines, other places around this country, and they're tremendously successful. So I would love you to explain to me why you're not supporting them.
Well, Andrew, let me ask you this. Is there any measure you think would be going too far in terms of, civil liberties to halt the spread? Is there anything that you would say is like too much?
Yeah, look, we're not forcing people in society to get vaccines. These are private companies. They can decide what they want to do in terms of, like, if you want to work for a private company and you don't want to get a vaccine, then you don't have to work there. But the reality is we need to stop this pandemic. We need to stop this from 3,000 people dying a day. And, this is the role of our government. And this is the point where we have gotten so far adrift from the good role a government can play that we have gone down the roles of conspiracy theories and fallen into traps that no other countries are falling across the world.
Rachel, do you want to respond to that?
There's so much to respond to. I love Feldman. I just don't know where to start. So let me just say this. I think the biggest way to address speech you don't agree with is to allow more speech, right? So the best thing I would love to see is Anthony Fauci go on Joe Rogan's show, because we've seen him absolutely lose his mind when pressed by Congress. I would love to see if he can even sustain.
Sanjay Gupta did, and they had a great conversation. It was wonderful. I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a lot revealed in that interview as well. So look, I would love to see this happen. If the government is serious about combating misinformation, then go on the biggest podcast in America and make your case.
Well, I wanted to get to one other subject. So yesterday, YouTube permanently banned conservative commentator Dan Bongino after Bongino allegedly made an attempt to evade a previous suspension. The Fox host uploaded a video to his main channel, while his secondary channel was actively suspended for violating YouTube's COVID misinformation policy. Both of Bongino's channels have since been removed. So I understand he is planning to migrate platforms anyway. They are pretty clear that, right, if you try to create another account to get around the enforcement action you've done previously, that is, I think, a pretty well-established policy that you're not supposed to violate. But, what do you make of this, Rachel?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of detail about sort of him trying to get around the sort of account creation issue. But again, the original meaning for the ban, or the reason for the ban, was COVID misinformation, which I can't even keep up anymore. I don't actually even know what constitutes COVID misinformation. You're seeing Rumble grow in popularity, much the way Parler did, in a way when Twitter was being still is very aggressive about its bans. You're seeing people migrate. Although the flip side of it is, I think, for many liberals who say, well, we need to ban misinformation. The more you crack down on this kind of stuff on the mainstream platforms, you are pushing people into niche markets. And that's exactly what's happening right now with Rumble. So it's not going to solve the misinformation crisis. What it will solve is still allowing people to have a voice. Although I will point out, I think Rumble's market share compared to YouTube is still tiny.
Yeah, Andrew, I would love for you to respond to that. Both the question of, aren't we essentially creating niche markets where people can no longer get both what you might call misinformation, but also good information, but also, isn't the scientific method based on the idea that we float theories and we discuss them and we test them, and a lot of things that people were saying in the beginning that was classified as misinformation, like, for example, that cloth masks don't work, have since been shown to be, accepted as well by the CDC. Would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Science evolves. Absolutely. When we started this pandemic, we were just learning about it. We are evolving and learning more about it every single day. So absolutely. But that's different than misinformation. Changing a scientific data point about cloth masks or about wearing masks in general or about, any of the things that have evolved throughout this pandemic are because of data. But guess what? The misinformation that we're seeing on horse pills and other pieces of information throughout this entire pandemic have proven to be false, right? Those are things like ivermectin has proven to be something that is not effective for COVID-19. So continuing to spread that misinformation, continuing to say, I took this, or continuing to say you should take that, that is dangerous to society because there are terrible side effects on a drug like that. That is not changing a data point that Anthony Fauci is saying based on science. That is just spewing nonsense.
Rachel, we'll give you the last word. I mean, I think that is a fair point that if people are saying you should take ivermectin for COVID, they're spreading that. That is not true information. Yeah, I agree with you. That's not true information.
They're saying it every day.
Yeah. No, I would label it the same way. But the question is, do we forbid people from doing that? And does that create more trust in the people saying those kinds of things?
I think the problem is we're linking it to medical choices, right? It's not just that we're saying, oh, don't talk about ivermectin. You have doctors trying to get other doctors, debarred or from medical licensing boards for prescribing ivermectin, which is a Nobel Prize winning drug for, liver disease and other diseases, for doctors who are trying to actually treat COVID patients. So when you have that link, and I think shutting down any kind of information or discussion, I think always leads to these real world consequences of, doctors actually trying to treat COVID patients based on their own medical judgment, not some kind of crap conspiracy theory, then you have, I actually think, a real problem. And you're seeing that link being made across the country right now.
Rachel, I would love your thoughts on probably another time, but on what's going on with the Surgeon General in Florida, because, it is unbelievable what's going on down there, and he's not trying to treat COVID patients very well.
By his response to the FDA banning a treatment, monoclonal antibodies?
That doesn't work for the current variant that we're dealing with, along with saying that masks don't work, along with saying that he won't admit to the vaccine, that taking the vaccine. I mean, it is just on and on and on. That it is putting people at risk for believing this and ultimately dying. I work with the Committee to Protect Healthcare. We have doctors seeing the effects of this in ERs every single day.
Well, I will say the CDC has now said cloth masks don't work either. And monoclonal antibodies, the doctors that I've talked to, they're still treating Delta patients and COVID classic, for lack of a better term, patients.
COVID zero, COVID light.
COVID zero, COVID alpha, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're not banning monoclonal antibodies.
We gotta leave it there. But thank you so much for being with us. Thank you, Rachel. Andrew, we always appreciate you being here. We bringing a perspective. We appreciate all sorts of different ideas here. So we really do appreciate you being willing to come on and offer what you have to say. So thank you both so much.
Thanks, guys.
We'll have more Rising right after this.